because they don't really care what you call my neighborhood. I live there. That's all I have to know.
All right, I'm going to get started. Thank you all. I'm opening the Interim Study Committee meeting on House Bill 1229, which I have affectionately dubbed the interim study on whether or not we should have a study. That's the way that it's written, but I want to clarify for those of you that are watching and with us. I'm Representative Sue Mullen from Bedford. I chair this interim study. With me to my right is Representative Art Ellison, and to my left, Representative Oliver Ford, two members of the interim study committee as well. So when we were looking at the group of school meal or nutrition related standards bills that we heard this past session, the question became, would one of those bills be a vehicle for further studies? So while it may look like this interim study is merely about whether or not we should study this, it actually is the umbrella that we're going to be looking at a variety of bills under. Those bills are House Bill 1229, which is the interim study bill, House Bill 1561, House Bill 1564, House Bill 1657, and House Bill 1660, which I know you gentlemen have information on that. If anybody else wants to look at those bills as we address them, then you're free to grab one of these packets. Also in the audience today is Representative Timothy Horrigan, who is the prime sponsor of 1229, and also Tim of our Representative Horrigan of 1660, which was the breakfast bill. Would you like to come up and just say a couple of words about school meals and sort of what the impetus has been for the bills that you have proposed?
When I first got thinking about this relatively recently, I've always thought that more students should be getting, all students should be fed at school, and if we can do it for free, that's fine. Even the relatively affluent families, I don't have a problem with that. And I especially got thinking of it during the pandemic, when in my school district, and I think probably just about every other one, they instituted a free lunch for everybody because they were going around, the school buses were going around everybody's house and delivering. It was easier for various reasons to deliver the lunches to everyone, along with the instructional materials, for several reasons. One of which was simply that in the interest of confidentiality, otherwise the kids would notice like which houses were getting. If you limited to just the free lunch kids, the other kids would definitely notice like who's getting the lunch and who isn't. So they're very smart about that, very clever about that sort of thing. So and also want to make sure the school breakfast was expanded. And so I've been working in that issue for several years with I guess a certain amount of success, but we haven't actually passed anything. And then other groups of representatives have similar ideas in there too. So that was I'm not sure what else more there is to say about that.
Right. No, I think it's I think your efforts have been admirable, because I think you've kept the issue alive in the eyes of many of us from year to year. And I think all of us, in looking at these bills, are pleased with the bipartisanship that is present on most of them, that these, hungry kids are hungry kids, period. So I certainly have admired your efforts on this. And is there, well, let me just go through the process of introducing what we're going to do today, next week, and then maybe if you have further information you want to share with us, we'd be happy to have you come up then So thank you. All right, so 1229, as I mentioned, is the study committee bill. And as an interim study, you know, what we're going to be doing is looking at whether or not we are recommending or not recommending future legislation. So we'll put that aside at this point, and maybe at a future date decide whether or not we actually need the study committee, or if we're able to study the issue without the study committee. 1561, if we go in chronological order, is a school nutrition standards bill. We are going to have the Department of Education Food and Nutrition Services with us next week at our meeting. So I think that getting their input and reflection on what was being proposed by House Bill 1561 would probably be a good idea. And perhaps Representative Deshays will be able to be with us then also. House Bill 1564 is a breakfast bill. That too came before us. And along the same lines as Representative Horgan's 1660, it looks to address food insecurity and meal needs in the morning, in addition to just offering the required meal at noontime. So we'll get some information about that. The 1657, which was the farm to school reimbursement program, those folks have been contacted and they have asked to meet with us in September as opposed to now, so that they can pull some additional information together for us. So unless anybody has an objection to waiting until September, then I think we'll do that. And 1660 is, as I mentioned, Representative Horgan's breakfast bill. So perhaps Representative Horgan and Representative Deshays will be working on one potential for the next session. If you're both reelected, right. If not, then we will pass that baton on to whoever is successful and wants to make sure that we don't have school children that go hungry. I also have a couple of points of information for us. I have an outline of topics that we're going to be talking about today. If Representative Ellison, if I could get you to hand this to Representative Hall. All right. An article came out yesterday, I believe, in a publication called K-12 Dive that indicates that the USDA is about to invest $100 million in school meal programs that are innovative. So I think once we get to the farm to school initiative, we might be looking at that as well. And also, excitingly, today we have two people from the New Hampshire Hunger Solutions project with us. We have Laura Milliken, who's the executive director, and Jessica Gorin, who's the deputy director. And if you would like to come forward and sit at that microphone, then we would be happy to hear what you have to share with us today.
Good morning. I'm Laura Milliken.
Laura, can I get you to, you're going to, unfortunately, you're going to have to swivel this thing to be heard.
Sure, I thought we could sort of share, but. So we have a packet of materials that we'd love to give out.
Great.
So as Laura's handing that out, I'm Jessica Gorin. I'm the Deputy Director of New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. And we're here today to, talk to you about the bills that were presented this year, but as well as maybe look at some opportunities for next year. in all of the information you'll see, New Hampshire does really poorly in school breakfast participation. We're 47th in the nation. And what that means is that we miss about 7,800 kids a day feeding them school breakfast. And we all know that when you have breakfast, you can learn better. The letters go home to families the day before any big standardized testing, reminding families so that they can do really well on those tests. But we know if we feed children every day, they'll do better in school every day and do better on those tests every day. So not only do we miss feeding 7,800 children a day, but because of that, we leave about 1.5 million federal dollars on the table that would go to school nutrition departments. They are separately funded. They are not funded by the school budget. They have their own budget. And so when they have increased participation, they have increased income. And those federal dollars can help to support things like farm to school when those dollars come in. So any policies that we can put in place that will help to improve school breakfast participation will help with those dollars, help with feeding more children, and also help with better health outcomes and reducing food insecurity in the long run.
Does anyone have any questions for Representative Ellison?
Thank you for taking my question. In terms of the 47% nationally, obviously that's a statewide average. Is there information available, municipality by municipality, school district by school district, that gives us specific numbers that make up the 47%?
So we are 47th out of 50 states.
Right.
So it's our ranking.
Yeah.
But yes, we do break it down by percent by school district when we get those numbers from the Department of Education.
Okay.
But just to kind of give you an example, we work really closely with the Nashua School District, and there's certain policies that can happen within a school district, like offering breakfast after the bell, which increases school breakfast participation. Of the 5 Title I elementary schools in Nashua, 4 have implemented breakfast after the bell during the pandemic when school meals were free. And they are feeding about 80% of their students when they have about 72% free and reduced eligibility. The one school who is not offering breakfast after the bell, that is a Title I school with about 70% free and reduced eligibility, is only serving 26% of their students.
Okay.
So
That's the kind of thing that would be very helpful for us, and you have access to it. You can get it to us. The Department of Ed can get it to us.
absolutely.
Not only school district by school district, but school by school, which is what you've just done, that's information that would be very helpful to us, or to me.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Laura. So you mentioned the Nashua School District in particular. How many school districts are you interfacing with at this point?
Currently, just Manchester and Nashua on a regular basis.
Okay. And my own follow-up is that because other school districts aren't aware of what you're doing? Is it because of a lack of funding? Is both of those things?
All of the above.
Yeah, okay.
And if I may jump in, we're certainly looking to expand our capacity to help all school districts who want to do better in their breakfast participation. I have, if I may be so bold, I have 2 suggestions for focus areas that I suggest. So one is there's an opportunity to do what's called Medicaid direct certification. You may remember that there was an amendment to a non-germane bill, I think it was HB 1627, that asked the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services to participate in a Medicaid direct certification demonstration project that the USDA had available. That would allow the matching of data between kids who are eligible for Medicaid and at the right income levels for free and reduced meals would be directly certified. And we estimate that there would be a huge impact for hungry kids in the state.
Yeah, that actually came before us right at the end of the session. I know that there was some concern about client privacy. I believe it was the privacy of the data that was the red flag that prevented certain members from feeling comfortable signing on.
So we have in your packet, the third handout is all about Medicaid direct certification. And certainly there were concerns expressed about privacy. I think that some of the testimony was somewhat misinformed. There is no sharing of data, especially parent data, with the federal government. That is not what happens. There would be data sharing between DHHS and DOE, but they are already sharing data to directly certify children on SNAP for free and reduced meals. So there is a track record of them doing it in a way that is respectful of data. And at no time is parent level data shared. We're only talking about child level data.
I'm sorry, Laura, can I add to that real quick? I have been working really closely with Manchester and Nashua, as I said, and I spent some time with their free and reduced eligibility administrators. Their free and reduced eligibility administrators are the only ones in the school district that have any access to the student data when it comes in. And it's only to identify them as free or reduced eligible. And then it is all coded electronically. So when that student comes with their ID, they swipe their ID and their meal is taken care of, right? There's no additional identification that child would be free or reduced. And every student pays for their meal that way. So it doesn't identify those students in any way at all. And that one person is the only person that has access to the data. They're so careful with it that if they know that social services in their school district is working with a family that is free and reduced eligible, they cannot reach out to that social services teacher and ask for them to help fill out that form because the data is so protected.
So I'm happy to answer more questions about Medicaid direct certification if that's the other thing that I sort of wanted to throw out there is that summer meals is a real issue, and is similarly administered. Although some summer meal sites are not schools; they are community based. It seems to me to be an extension of school meals. It's sort of what do we do when children are not in school and are hungry. So I respectfully suggest.
Representative Ellison.
And following up on that, are the reimbursement rates for summer meals, however they're being delivered, the same as they are during the school year, or are they different?
Well, it's a bit of a complicated question because it depends on where you are and the community's level of poverty.
Yep.
So they're. Can you answer that more clearly?
And there's 2 summer feeding programs, one for areas that are not eligible to feed all children 0 to 18, and that's the summer feeding program. And then there's the seamless summer option. And the seamless summer option is what the school districts are using right now to feed all kids year round. And that's at a higher reimbursement because it's based on higher poverty rates. And that's where the Medicaid direct certification that Laura's talking about would also be beneficial, because when more students are identified as being eligible, it increases that area eligibility, and it would increase the communities in New Hampshire that can offer free summer meals for all.
Thank you.
And just to add one more thing, sorry to keep switching back and forth, but there is a genuine crisis that's about to happen countrywide, but certainly in New Hampshire, as the the waivers that have allowed schools and summer meal programs to feed all children will end at the end of June unless Congress acts. So, but if those waivers end, we have already been contacted by a number of summer meals programs that are not going to be able to do the level of service that they did last year, or not going to be able to offer summer meals at all. And school districts will have a very, very difficult time, figuring out how to feed as many kids as they did before. Most of them will only be able to serve children who are eligible for free and reduced meals at those respective costs. And that will no doubt create hunger for children.
So does your organization have any access to what implementing a breakfast program, for instance? We have a couple of bills that are specifically looking at breakfast programs. We heard some facts and figures during this session that it was estimated that maybe 30 schools were not providing breakfast, and that maybe one of the reasons they weren't providing breakfast was because they could not absorb the startup costs for a breakfast program. Does New Hampshire Hunger Solutions have any data at all on what those startup costs might be per student, or do you have anecdotal information about places where it was thought to be impossible and yet here it is and it's working effectively?
We don't have that data on hand at this moment in time, but as a part of this, committee, we could gather that data. I would say that it's probably the majority of it is a staffing issue and funds for staffing, because those staff members would have to come in at an earlier hour. So it's the initial, it would be the initial labor hours that are needed in order to start up a breakfast program, and food purchasing. But I know that gets reimbursed, and the commodity foods that come into the school districts can cover that initially. So in my opinion, it would be labor hours initially, but Laura has something else.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that the best people to ask that question to is the or at the DOE. I mean, I think that they've probably, there's not so much turnover there, but I think that there are people probably who have shepherded people through. So our own board chair ran the nutrition programs at the DOE, and we could certainly talk to her about how.
Sherry White?
Oh, no, before Sherry.
Oh,
Elaine
before
Van
Sherry.
Dyke.
Okay, all right. I'm like, Sherry White
No,
retired
Sherry,
to go and do this?
No, Sherry retired.
Okay. All right.
Yes, no, I'm sure Sherry would know.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned, we have them scheduled to come in and meet with us next week. But you folks were so on top of things and so enthusiastic about coming in today. It was bring it on down. Absolutely. If you have information for us, share it. I think what I see us doing during this meeting, and then piggybacking on the DOE, is maybe coming up with a list of questions that we would like answered. And certainly on this committee, we look at cost. Mm-hmm. And I know that whether it was the structure of the bills themselves, or I don't have the answer for why it seemed so difficult to estimate what exactly things would cost. But, Representative Horgan's bill, I think, was somewhere around $650,000. And Representative DeShae's bill, it was determined that they couldn't estimate a cost. So anything you can do to sort of give us any thriving indicators that you have would be greatly helpful for us as a committee. Representative Ellison.
Just another question to tie down numbers here. That bill that we dealt with the 30 school districts that didn't have breakfast, and that was a struggle just on that alone. But you're talking here about 7,869 students without school breakfast. It seems to me that goes beyond 30 school districts then, doesn't it?
Yeah, those are the students that so I'll start with the formula. There's Food Research and Action Center provides a formula to measure school breakfast participation. So they look at for every 100 students that are free and reduced eligible participating in lunch, that there would be 70 free and reduced eligible students participating in breakfast in each school.
Okay.
So that's where that measurement of, and the 7,800 that number comes from FRAC. So that's only for school districts that are participating in the school breakfast program. It would be additional to include the 30 school districts that do not have a school breakfast program.
Okay. So we're talking about in the 7869, we're talking about school districts that offer a breakfast program, but not everyone who's eligible for the breakfast program is participating, and that's the difference. Am I correct in
Yeah.
saying that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, Representative Ford or Representative Hall? Any additional questions? Anything that you folks would, any additional things to share?
We'll certainly work to answer the questions you've raised, although I think we'll need help from the DOE for much of it.
Right.
And we look forward to addressing this. We, have been trying to increase our capacity
Right.
to address this issue and to assist schools in expanding their breakfast participation by changing the way they offer breakfast. This is a challenging time for schools, and we're really well aware of that.
Right.
Both because of supply chain issues with food and because of staffing issues. So I want to be very clear that we are very cautious about asking schools to do more without adequate support.
Right, you have to have an infrastructure and for the building to stand. Representative Ford, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a sort of an untechnical question, if you will. It's more of an attitudinal question, but you probably experienced it, so I'm going to ask it without reference to any particular school. But one of the comments we heard when we were talking about this, several months ago, was that if a school system wanted to have breakfast, then they should decide to have breakfast. And there was kind of they choose not to kind of proposal or statement. And the last school lunch I ate was in 1957, so I don't claim any expertise in this at all. But it was just sort of, is it just a question of the, shall we say, wealth of the town, the budget kinds of sensitivity, that they might choose not to have breakfast for children? It occasioned quite a flurry in our committee about people who would say, how can you tell that these kids come to school hungry? Well, then the people who had been teachers and principals spoke up and said they don't perform very well. And so I was just sort of looking for your read when you see it. What do you sense is the kind of, I guess, knee-jerk reaction when you say we need to have more food in the schools or more breakfast or something like that? If you feel free to comment on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you. And you don't have to bag anybody in particular. It can be a broad general statement.
I have to say, I think Laura and I probably both have different stories to share and things that we can add. So I'll start with just, I know in schools that we've worked with and talked to that school nurses have 25 hunger related visits a day per school in the district. That's kids going to the nurse's office because they have a headache, a stomach ache, they're feeling tired, a variety of reasons. And then the nurse codes that because that student was, their symptoms were alleviated by having a snack or given a breakfast, because they weren't able to have breakfast when they left the house, or maybe they left the house at 6 a.m. and by 9 they're really hungry again, right? So when a school district does not offer breakfast at all, there's not even that other opportunity. So I think that when we start asking these questions, we have to look deeper, right? And asking the school nurse, like, how many visits are they seeing? How much money is the school nurse spending out of their own pocket to provide snacks? How much money are the teachers spending out of their own money to provide snacks? Or some schools even have pantry programs. How much money are they spending out of their pantry project in order to offer snacks in the morning when the school breakfast is no longer available, whether it's because breakfast isn't offered after the bell, or breakfast is not offered by that school at all. And I think that in general, people have been really surprised when they hear the percent of students that are having hunger-related visits, but that might not even have had dinner the night before. So the only meal they're getting a day is school lunch if they participate in that.
Thank you.
And the one thing that I would add is that I think that schools often are very busy being schools and educating students and aren't as focused on their school meal programs. I think that despite the fact that there are quite a number of studies now that show the benefits of breakfast to students, not just in the short term, but really in the long term. And I've included a couple of articles with the study sources cited. So despite the fact that there is all this great research that shows how important breakfast is, I think it's not well understood. I think I think that often schools think, well, we offer breakfast, not realizing that the breakfast participation, because kids have to come in early and sort of be tagged as those kids, so often kids don't participate as they get older because they don't want to be stigmatized. So I think there's a lot of education to do, I guess, is the takeaway. I think that that schools need to better understand, and they need the support to make changes.
I have a question for you. Do you have a sense of, Manchester and Nashua are similar in the sense that they're both cities, but different certainly in makeup and population. Do you have a sense of what the percentage of, total population of students, what the percentage of kids who would benefit from a program like this is, and how the districts are covering the cost for it? Is it 50% of the students? Is it 75% of the students, or does it vary from neighborhood to neighborhood?
So it'll vary from school to school, and then by school district, and then by community in New Hampshire, right? So it's a little bit of it can be complicated math, but the DOE does a great job of breaking down all of the percents of free and reduced applications that are of eligibility by community. So what we do at New Hampshire Hunger Solutions is, when we're working with the community, we look at percent poverty, and then we look at percent poverty by census tract, and look at it with free and reduced eligibility. For example, Manchester has about 46% overall free and reduced eligibility, but there are schools in their district that have 80%. So when we're looking at that census tract or that school district, we would look at the census tracts that attend that school to measure that. So for the 30 schools that don't have a breakfast program, we would have to have a list of those schools, and then we could then go and look at their free and reduced eligibility and see the percent of students that would be impacted by having a breakfast program, and then base it on lunch participation. So it's that percent of free and reduced eligible students participating in lunch. We're looking for 70% of them to participate in breakfast.
Thank you for that. And the second part of my question was, how are they managing this in terms of resources? I mean, you mentioned staffing. Obviously, if you're going to serve breakfast, you have to have at least a few people in the morning to sort of get things up and rolling. So the districts would be on the hook for that. What about or would they?
The districts, the school district budget is separate from the school food service budget, which in a lot of communities in New Hampshire, they actually source that out to other programs like cafe services. And I'm losing the other ones, but there's a couple other in the state that provide the programs, and it's because they're funded separately. So their funds come from the reimbursement from school meals. So I apologize for not having these numbers off the top of my head, but like breakfast.
This was supposed to be an organizational meeting. We'll be meeting again.
Okay, good. So school breakfast is about $2.60 reimbursement for a a student who is eligible for free breakfast. So of that $2.61 or 60 cents per student, that meal reimbursement pays for the cost of the meal, and it pays for the labor hours and any other overhead that's associated with serving that one meal per student. So again, it's numbers. The more students that participate, and by providing breakfast after the bell, you get more students to participate, then they'll have more money to fund a breakfast program. There definitely are startup costs involved, and again, like Laura said, the DOE would know more about that, but as far as once it's up and running, those are the types of, that's how those programs are funded.
Representative Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Sorry. Are there any kids who are left out because parents aren't willing to do the paperwork and how is that handled? So, if they're not willing to say, hey, I need help, I'm too proud, what about that? Because I have a feeling there might be a population out there.
Yeah, and that is when the school district is impacted. When a parent doesn't fill out the form, that is presented to the school district to reimburse that debt. So if a child is eligible but not identified as eligible because the form is not completed and they're not directly certified through SNAP, TANF, or foster care, then they just keep receiving a bill every time they participate in school lunch. And depending on the school district, and it's not a great thing to say, but some kids will then only be allowed a sun butter sandwich. Some kids will be denied, and they'll say you have a little announcement will go off at the register that says you have a high balance, and you can't receive your lunch. And we've also heard stories, and these are stories, so I can't, and I don't know which school districts, but these are stories that food service staff have thrown away the lunch when the student gets there and they have too high of a balance to receive the meal.
I'm not surprised. Thank you.
Representative Ellison.
Following up on that, if the waivers go away, are we back to then which parents fill out the forms and which ones don't? I mean, which is the situation we had for years anyway. Is that correct?
That is correct. So that was kind of the disappointment of the Medicaid direct certification bill not passing this year. We're still trying to, the application's not due until September. So if we can figure out a way to get the approval for DOE and DHHS to fill that form out, then we would, in the 2023-2024 school year, would use Medicaid direct certification as the eligibility measurement versus having to fill out the form.
And the waivers, are they going to, at this point, without further congressional action, going away this June or next June?
This June 30th.
This month? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And I'll just, not to go down a rabbit hole, but I'll just flag for the committee that that the way that we measure poverty in New Hampshire turns on free and reduced meals. It is significant that there are a number of parents, who who can't or won't or are afraid to fill out free and reduced meal forms. Not just in the school meal space, but in a whole range of education funding for schools.
Additional questions?
No.
All right, feel free to stay in touch with us. And obviously, you're welcome to attend any meetings that we have scheduled. We will be, as I said, meeting next week. Then we will be on recess for July and August. So we will be back in September with the, understanding. I mean, my heart goes out to you in terms of that application that's due in September, because it certainly is not this interim study committee that has the authority to approve that application process. But thank you so very much for bringing your information forward, and any additional information that you would like us to have, feel free to come back.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So in a similar vein, I will say that the New Hampshire Education Network, NHEN, on Monday, June 13th, is doing a webinar on food security and changes in programming for New Hampshire students and families. Jessica, I believe, is the primary speaker, perhaps, in that. Jessica, is that safe to say? Yeah, Christina Pretorius from Reaching Higher is also involved. If you, do you happen to have the registration posted on your website? I'm sure Reaching Higher in New Hampshire has it posted on theirs. But the public is invited, any elected officials are invited, but you need to go to Reaching Higher's website and register for the Zoom link to be able to watch this. And that's Monday, June 13th from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. I've already registered, so we're good to go. That came across my screen last night. So I'm interested in input from the three of you about any topics that you would. We have the DOE coming next week, so I would like, if you have specific questions that you would like the DOE to address, if you get those questions to me within the next couple of days, then I will package them and make sure that Kelly Rambo and Melissa White are aware. I would like to streamline the process if we can. If we can give them questions ahead of time, then we may actually have them appearing before us next week with some answers rather than developing the questions. If not, then at least we know, they'll know what July and August will mean in terms of what kinds of things we're looking for. Does that make sense? Yes.
Just in terms of
Will you?
I was going to yell at you.
Use your teacher voice.
In terms of your perception of where we go, we're looking then, obviously, at the fall and a series of meetings and coming to some conclusions. I would suspect before those of us who may be reelected are coming back in January, that we would have a package. We would have a recommendation for the committee prior to January 1st. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes. It's certainly by the report, I believe, is due at the end of October. So we have to have our interim study report in. And what we will be doing is saying either, yes, we recommend future legislation, or no, we don't recommend future legislation. That legislation does not necessarily need to have been written by then, but certainly incumbent legislators can start with OLS, I believe, the first week in September. So I would think, because I'm looking at Representative Horgan, who's nodding up and down, our school meals cheerleader, that any member of this committee or any other member of the general court who is running for reelection can certainly draft legislation based on what we hear as a part of this interim study on their own, and then the committee will need to decide whether or not, you know, it's a straight up, yes, we think that this needs additional legislation, or no, we don't, for whatever reasons. Yeah. Does that make any sense? Okay.
And additionally, regardless of what we recommend, legislation may go forward on this topic.
I would anticipate that it would. Okay. You know, we're a study committee, so we're low on the totem pole. I would think that there will, in fact, be people who will, on either side of the issue, ultimately go forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
Are we-
Representative Ford.
get where I can be heard. Are we going to consider schools that are charter schools and things like that in addition to the traditional public schools?
Yeah, I would think that when the Department of Education is with us, one of the things that I would think that we would want to be looking at are school meals, period.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of where those school meals, because I'm curious, I want to know, because we have some private schools in New Hampshire that participate in the school meals program. We have public schools in New Hampshire that don't participate in this. So I would really like the DOE to use this opportunity to educate us on the variety of scenarios that are out there. Because, you know, as I've said, you've heard me say ad nauseum, right? A hungry child is a hungry child, no matter where they live or where they attend school. And we need to be looking at all of them, I think.
When I first got put on this committee, began asking, because this is outside my realm of experience since I was a child. I have had no experience with this business except for running a kitchen when I was in college. But the whole funding and the issue of, call it shaming or whatever it might be, of people who had to admit they couldn't afford to feed their children breakfast, is entirely new to me. So I began asking around, and I stumbled upon a lady who was running a collective of 70 or 80 homeschooling people, or home type school things. And she has already conducted a survey and given me 80-something responses to questions about meals and so forth. And of course, we can change the questions and send them back out and so forth. But what I was basically saying, I'm sure each of you has those same kinds of contacts, and that we might want to reach out and find out, you know, just more. Because for me, it's a discovery process from day one. I mean, I admit my knowledge is very slender on this. And so, yes, I think it needs to be. I think the question is how much of it needs legislative address, how much needs some other form of address, or even just full public conversation about that as an issue. And, you know, I quite agree that this is something that we certainly ought to be able to get to a point where we can say, something needs to be done. We're not sure what, but, you know, this needs to be addressed and considered.
Yeah, I don't really, homeschooled students, I think, may fall under a different category than
than the charter
federally
school.
funded public school programs. Charter schools are public schools
Yeah.
in New Hampshire, so they're already in the bucket in terms of, they may have different rules and regulations, but in terms of the eligibility as being considered as a public school.
Right.
The charter schools won't be a
But there
problem.
was
then.
some discussion in the committee earlier when people were asking questions, they're legitimate questions.
Mm-hmm.
Should they be required to meet the same standards when they have a lunch compared to that? And so, all right, that's a question that needs to be answered,
Absolutely.
you know, and,
Yeah.
and I don't have an opinion. I'm sure they have
Yeah.
an opinion. I haven't read any of the responses I've gotten yet. I just got them last night. But I think that these are things that we might explore just because we don't know the answer.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yep, I hear you, Representative Ford, and I'm game for the discussion.
What?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Representative Hall.
The starting point is clearly, we need to acknowledge that there is a problem. Right? I mean, that's the bottom line, that we have a problem that needs to be solved. So, I'm not sure that everybody agrees with that.
Succinctly put, Representative Hall. Yeah, in terms of whether or not we have the responsibility to feed hungry children?
Well, I think we, I'm saying, start with the idea, the notion that we do have hungry children.
Yeah, that was a question. I was asking you, is that what you're saying? that-
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That would certainly produce a discussion.
As I said, Representative Ford, I'm game for the discussion.
I'm thinking of that kid that comes over and eats all the stuff in your fridge because you and your kids and him are sitting there having snacks after school. You
Yeah.
find yourself, wait a minute, did we buy strawberries for them?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Well, I feel fairly confident that the refrigerator in the school building probably has a lock on it, so nobody's coming in after practice and eating out of that refrigerator. But I do think that we have to acknowledge whether or not whether we like it or not, we have to acknowledge that there are hungry kids and that it's through no fault of their own. So what do we do? Food insecurity is a quasi disability. Food insecurity affects how you approach the day that you're in. And if it's chronic food insecurity, I mean, I'm sure that we could sit here and listen to thousands of stories of siblings taking care of younger children, of teachers taking care of students, of neighbors taking, because we have populations that not only live in poverty, but we have homeless populations, we have populations of kids whose parents are incarcerated. So this is, I want to, to the best of our ability, I want to focus on the child. Not on whether or not the mother or the father or grandparent or whatever is not doing what they're supposed to do. I think what we need to focus on is the fact that we have hungry kids in the state of New Hampshire. And every morning I pick up the newspaper and there's another $1 million in surplus being touted on the front page of the paper. And I'm thinking, holy Toledo, we almost had a stroke when we saw $650,000 to feed hungry kids, to feed all kids basically breakfast in schools. So, yeah. Representative Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to follow up with your comment before, yes, I think it is our responsibility to make sure that our kids are fed. If not us, who?
If not now, when? So again, if you have specific information that you would like from the DOE, and you can email me those questions within the next 48 hours, that would be terrific, because then that would at least give them a couple of days to the sooner the better, to gather data and get into us on Monday as the first meeting between us and the Department of Education. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to raise at this point? All right, true to my word, 1 hour. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And our next meeting is Monday, June 13th at 1 o'clock. All right, I am closing the meeting. Thank you very much.